Good morning. It's glad to have you here to join us for our Sunday school time together. And I have brought with me three things. It's Sunday school, and I haven't been able to do an object lesson now in over 3 months. So I decided to bring three things here to show you and see what you tell me they have in common. All right. I have a tool. All right. That's here. This is a tool. I have a computer part, and I have a plumbing part. Everybody loves plumbing. So the three of these, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. You can talk about it with the people that you're with. What do you think these three things have in common? All right. Tool, computer part, plumbing part. All right. Answers are in. They're all adapters. All right. This adapts from a 1/2 inch to 3/8 inch drive for sockets, and this adapts from an old mouse type cord to USB, and this adapts from copper pipe to PEX pipe. They all adapt, and adapting is just changing from one thing to another, or accommodating really from one thing into something else. And God has made our bodies amazing at adapting to the surroundings around us. Okay, it's the miraculous ability that He's implanted in us. For people to think that this can just kind of happen just amazes me. But the design that he's put in us, Lord, in us, if to increase our heart rate when it's needed, to perspire in order to keep our temperature the right thing, everything is all there. And there's more systems that God has all implanted in our bodies to help us adapt every second to find the best environment for our vital functions that we have. There's some substances I was reading about, and I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce this right because I'm not a doctor, but it's called prostaglandins, I believe. It's called prostaglandins, and it was originally called that because they thought this came from the prostate gland, and it has nothing to do with that at all. But these things called prostaglandins, they travel through your body from cell to cell, and they are basically messenger fluids, and they do different things. One will lower your blood pressure, one will raise your blood pressure depending on what you need. One can help with clotting or to stop from clotting. One can help with to expand your bronchial tubes to get more oxygen in, and another one will react and tell us to contract those things. And one initiates inflammation, and one hinders that from happening. And it's just amazing what all these processes that happen every second so that our body can function. All right. It helps us to adapt. All right. God has made our bodies to adapt, and we need to adapt. We've adapted to a new way of life with this COVID thing. People don't seem to mind standing in line to get into Home Depot, okay, or standing in line to go to a grocery store. And people are conscious when you're walking down the aisle. If you're not paying attention, somebody else will stand back like this because they want to have that social distancing there, you know. And we've come to adapt very quickly to this new way of life, or at least temporary new way of life that we have. People adapt to climate. If they're going to live in a cold climate, although I don't know that my wife could ever adapt to live in a cold climate, but when it gets colder here in Canada, she learns to adapt, okay? And some people will adapt to cold climates, some people adapt to warmer climates, to hotter climates, and the ability to adapt is a good quality, all right? But is there a danger in being too adaptable? We're going to touch on that as we go through our Bible passage this morning. As we look at it, we've been looking at Elisha and some of the neat things that God allowed him to do. And as last week we looked at how he single-handedly captured an entire Syrian army and led them into Samaria simply by asking God to blind these people from seeing what was real. They had no idea where they were going. They didn't recognize any of these places as he took them right into the middle of Samaria. And he stopped after they went back home, it stopped this thing where they would send these bands, it's called, these bands of soldiers would come in and they would attack the border towns of Israel. And they would try to take over those little things and send in just not all of the army, but they were large enough people. I mean, they had this whole city of Dothan surrounded that Elisha and his servant were in. But after they went back, they stopped doing this entirely. And time passed, and it seems that Jehoram, who was the king of Israel, wicked king, all right, but it seems that he had probably let down his guard, and as these guys had not attacked any of these border towns anymore, and it really seems when you do a little bit of study on him that he really wasn't that good of a military type leader at all. But he may have let down his guard some, and then we see where King Ben-Hadad had he decided that he was going to bring the entire Syrian army in to attack. All right, now if you take your Bibles and come with me please to 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6, starting in verse 24, you will notice that there is a paragraph marker that starts here, and one might kind of wonder why the chapter 7 didn't start there as we go through, and I'll explain that a little bit as we go through. Remember that these paragraph breaks, those were there in the inspired. What we have for our verses and for our chapters, that was not there. Those were put in after the fact just to help us find our way around, okay? But it starts here in verse 24, and it says, "And it came to pass after this, that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all his host and went up and besieged Samaria." Okay, now basically it tells us here that he took all of his hosts. This is a whole army is coming in here. And you basically have two strategies that you could use, all right? The first one is you could try to attack this city that is walled, all right? And there would be outside of these walls, there would be a span where there is nothing. It's not like there's forest coming up to the side of the city or anything like that. There would be a clear space there so that they could see if anybody's coming to attack from any direction from on top of this wall. So the options really that they have is to try to attack this wall and try to get in this wall, but it would really cost a lot of their army lives as these men are sitting ducks for all the guys shooting bows and arrows and whatever else weapons that they had from the wall that they would shoot down on these guys. And eventually, with all of these people, they could probably overtake the city, but there would be a great loss of life to do so. Much reminds me of when Canada was in war with Dieppe, or when they went there and they made the attack rather on Dieppe, and the way that was situated when they came into the beaches of there was these high cliffs on either side where the Germans were up there with machine guns and just picking off the Canadians right as they came to shore. 907 Canadians, I believe, died within just a few hours of trying to attack this beach and get there. But they were just right there in the open. And the same would be here with these walled cities. When the armies would try to come in, they would be getting a great loss of life. Well, the second strategy was what the Syrians decided to do, and they brought lots of food with them, and they're just going to camp outside the city, and they've got the city basically surrounded, sort of, and then their main camp is there, okay, and they're just going to wait them out. They're going to starve out the city of Samaria, and that's what they decided to do. So they brought all these supplies in, these food supplies that they had, and they just waited these people out, okay? Some time had passed. It doesn't tell us how much time has passed here, but some time passes in Samaria, and clearly the food is gone, all right? And take a look at verse number 25. It says, "And there was a great famine in Samaria." This is the city of Samaria, all right? Understand there was a country of Samaria, but this is the city of Samaria where the king lives as his palace there. Verse 25, "And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and a fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver." A donkey's head. They're selling a donkey's head for 80 pieces of silver. What is there to eat on a donkey's head? I suppose you have his brains, but how much meat is there? Maybe you get a little bit of his neck or something. I don't know, would they take it and they boil it and make some soup out of it or what? But 80 pieces of silver, all right? Now, I like doves. I love doves. We have a couple of doves that come around our house, and they're very plain-looking bird, but they're just so calm. Remember years ago, we had a dove come into the entryway of the church, and kind of sat between the windows. If you remember, we used to have all those nice windows on the front, and there was a railing there in front of that, and this dove sat there in between there. Though we can't have this dove inside the church building, all right? So I wasn't sure what to do, so I put my hands through the rail, and I'm thinking, I'm going to pick up this bird, and he's going to start pecking my hands, all right? But I picked him up, and he just sat there in my hands. But as I brought my arms up, I got to the railing, and I couldn't get past there. So Donnie Roswell was there, and he reached in, and he grabbed the bird, and it didn't peck him either, took the thing outside, and he opened up his hands like this, and the bird sat there in his hands. And he had to eventually go like this to get the bird to fly. It was just so calm. Well, I love doves, but I'm not going to eat what these guys are eating, all right? And it shows here, okay? How much does money really worth? Okay? When they're willing to spend 80 pieces of silver just to get a donkey's head, okay? In a time of famine, it is freely done away with the money. It really shows what its value is. When it comes to life, it's not worth what we all think it's worth, all right? And they part with that money, no problem at all. So the king this is the situation that's in Samaria. They are starving to death. They have no food. They're eating unspeakable things, unclean things according to the law and everything else. It didn't matter. They were eating whatever they could get their hands on to eat, okay? And the king is walking along the wall, probably inspecting, making sure that, that the guards are there and they're doing their post and making sure that we can see where we're going to go, and they've got enough weapons that are there in case they're going to be attacked or whatever. But he's walking on top of the wall here, and a woman cries out to him and says to him, "Help, where does it here? We go." Help my, in verse 26, the last part, it says, "Help my Lord, O king." And the king says to her, he says, if he immediately blames God, okay? He says, if God's not going to help you, what am I going to do for you? Okay? And as he does that, the woman, he finds out what the woman wants. Unbelievable what this woman says. She says, me and my friend, we agreed. We made an agreement that we would boil my son today and we would eat him, and tomorrow we would eat her son. So we did that. We boiled my son and we ate him, and now comes the next day, she doesn't want to eat her son. So you need to do something about this, king. All right? And the king, he is just appalled by this. But I ask, how could a mother eat her own child? How could she do that? We're going to come back to that in a little bit here. But we see here what the king does. Look at verse number 30. And it says, and it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. He tears his clothes, and he reveals that he has sackcloth beneath, all right? And one might wonder, well, maybe the king is repenting, okay? That is sometimes what they would do. If you remember the account of Jonah when he goes to Nineveh and he preaches, and the king of Nineveh tells all of his people, well, let me read you the verse. In Jonah chapter 3 and verse 5, it says, so the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest of them even to the least of them. They put that on there, and we think, well, maybe, the king is coming back to God. It's not the case, all right? Before we jump to that conclusion, we need to understand they wore sackcloth for a number of reasons. They were all sad reasons, but it was for a number of reasons. It may be for penance, which is kind of what they were doing in Nineveh, all right? But it can also, they would wear it for mourning when someone died, or if it was in a time of great distress. And this was a time of great distress. The city was starving to death, okay? And we see here where this guy's heart is. Is he repented before God? No. Look at verse 31. And then he said, God do so and more also to me, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, shall stand on him this day. Instead of tearing down the golden calves, instead of calling for a nationwide reform and people getting back to God, what's he want to do? He wants to kill Elisha. Where did he learn that from? I ask. Any answers? Yeah, okay. His mother. Look at 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 2. 1 Kings 19:2, it says, then Jezebel, that's his mother, wicked, evil, vile queen Jezebel. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, not Elisha, but Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. He learned it from her, okay? He is not repentant. He is, instead of him repenting, of leading the worship of these people with and continuing on with the worship of these golden calves and anything else but God, he goes and he wants to kill Elisha, all right? So he sends a messenger to Elisha first, okay? And he follows behind, and God tells Elisha what is going to happen. And Elisha's in his house, and there's some elders, it calls them there with him, these other older men that are there, and he says, this is what's happening. This man is coming to take off my head. When he bangs on the door, hold the door closed until the king comes, because he is coming right behind him. Okay, so they hold the door closed until the king shows up, and here's where we have this chapter break where chapter 7 starts, and again, I tell you, these chapter breaks and verse breaks are not inspired, but this would be a paragraph break. So it's imperative that we often, as we're studying the Bible, to not necessarily discount the chapter breaks, but to read through them, because sometimes the whole passage it carries on, okay? And that's what happens here as he's coming there to he makes that message that he's going to do this, and then in chapter 7 verse 1 it talks about Elisha talking. The whole thing just carries right on through, okay? And as they're doing that, okay, it's important, like I say, to get this in context. So in chapter 7 in verse 1, we see here where it says, and then Elisha said, hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and in the gate of Samaria. He says the prices are going to go back to normal tomorrow at this time. In 24 hours, we're going to go from 80 pieces of silver for a donkey's head down to 1 shekel for a big pile of fine flour and for barley, okay? And here's this one guy. I call him the king's weasel. You can call him whatever you want. He is the king's yes man, all right? In verse 2, it says, then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God and said, behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. These are like, it's like food is going to fall down from heaven, kind of like manna from heaven. You know, if this, how can this be? This can't possibly be. All right. And Elisha says, you're going to see it happen, but you're not going to get any of it. You're not going to eat any of it. Okay. And then the scene changes, and we step outside the city of Samaria, outside those gates. And there are 4 lepers that are there. Now, I'm purely speculating here, but I want you to just think about this. And I might be right, I might be wrong, it really doesn't matter. This is just one of those things that's kind of fun to talk about. But I really think that one of these 4 lepers may have been, not positively, but he may have been Gehazi. All right? And the reason we see this is lepers can't live inside the city. They would have been outside the city. Now, it's possible it could be 4 other lepers that are outside of Samaria, but we'll see in chapter 8 where Gehazi actually comes in and he's talking with the king in the king's palace in Samaria. So it seems like he is right near there, okay? And possibly because of what happens over this next little while and what Gehazi and the other 3 lepers, if it indeed is Gehazi, and they pass on this good news that I'm about to share with you in just a moment here, maybe that's why the king is able to call him in there. So it's possible that it might be Gehazi. It may not be, but it's possible. Just fun thought to think about, okay? But these four lepers are out there. It doesn't name him here, okay? So, but these four lepers are outside the gate, and understand with the lepers, because they were not allowed inside the city. In order for them to get food or anything like that, it would be friends and family that would bring that out to them, okay? Obviously, that's not happening now, okay? They're in a famine. For one thing, they have no food inside the city, and for another, you know, they're not going to come outside, even if they had to bring it out to give to these men. So here's these men, and they probably scrounged around for whatever they could find outside, and they come to a point where we're going to die. Okay, we can't go in the city. They're not going to let us in there. You know, they may not understand everything that's happening in the city, but they do know that they're out of food there. Okay, and they say, you know, why don't we go and put ourselves in the hands of the Syrians, because we're going to die here. And it's interesting in what they say. It's kind of humorous actually when they say, well, we're going to die here, so let's go and see the Syrians, and if they kill us, we shall but die. We're going to die anyway. Okay, maybe they'll have compassion on us. They've got lots of food. They brought it from Syria to starve out these people here in Samaria. Maybe they'll give us some of this food. All right. So it says that they go at twilight, and as they get there, there's nobody there. God has intervened here again. The first time, the Syrians were defeated with Elisha, as they by God had affected their eyesight so that they couldn't see what was right in front of them. And now God has defeated the Syrians by affecting their hearing, so that they were hearing something that wasn't even there. Okay? They thought, look in verse number 6, it says of chapter 7, it says, "For the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us." I ask you how much sense this makes. They have the city surrounded. How would they think the king got word out to the Hittites and the Egyptians? Internet, telephone, telegraph? No, okay? But you know what? It doesn't matter. They can't think straight. Show you how non-thinking straight they were. In their rush to get out of there, okay? As they're hurrying to get out, they leave the horses tied up and they run. Wouldn't it be faster to jump on the horse and ride if there really is something there? No, because they were in such a panic, and God had fooled them so drastically by what he had done there that they just took off and they ran, okay? So the four lepers, they go into the first tent, and they eat and they eat and they eat and they eat their fill. And then they find some silver and some gold and some new clothes and stuff like that, and they take that out and they run and they hide it. They come back in. They look around a second tent. Oh, and they find some more gold, some more cool clothes. They grab those things and they run and they hide those things. And as they come back, they think, you know what? What we're doing isn't good, because if we stay here and we don't tell this good news to the people in the city, something bad is going to happen to us, okay? Maybe they're a bit superstitious or whatever, but something bad is going to happen to us if we don't say something. So I said, all right, so they go back and they get the porters of the gate, and they tell the porters of the gate, listen, the Syrians are gone. Everything is there. It's wide open. You can come and help yourself to all the food you want. It's there. We're safe. They bring message to the king, and the king says, no. This is a trap. This is a trap that they've set up. And you know, I don't think it's so much that the king doesn't want to believe the lepers as the king doesn't want to believe Elisha. He doesn't want to listen to what Elisha has to say. He wants to reject him. So the men say, well, let's take 5 horses and that are left here, and we'll go and we'll check it out. Close the gate behind us. We'll go and we'll check it out. And the king says, tell you what, you can take 2 horses. So they go and they ride in there, and they find that the place is empty. But they follow it for several miles down towards the Jordan, and they see stuff laying on the side. There's clothes over here, and there's money here, and there's swords here, and there's whatever they had. They were lightning with getting too heavy to carry. Let's just throw it, and let's just keep running. And they went for a long ways, and they came back and says, no, it's gone. It's empty. The camp is just like the lepers have said it is, all right? They verified it to the king. The king takes his trusty weasel man and he puts him in charge at the gate. Okay? And as he's opening the gate, trying to conduct traffic through there, I'm a big tough guy that I am, and everybody's got to do what I say, the people trample him to death. Look at verse 18 of chapter 7. It says, "And it came to pass, as the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and a measure of fine flour for a shekel shall be tomorrow about this time at the gate of Samaria. And the Lord answered the man of God and said, Now behold, if the Lord should make windows in heaven, might such a thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not eat thereof. And so it fell out for him, for the people trode upon him in the gate, and he died." Who predicted the prices of food for the next day? It was Elisha. This message here in this passage of scripture that we've looked at, it's not just that God rescued the people when they didn't deserve it, although he did. But I think it's more that God fulfilled the promises that he made through his prophet Elisha. God always fulfills his promises. He always does. A second point I'd like you to look at, other than God always fulfills his promises, that there is nothing impossible with God. Multiple ways of doing things. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that's impossible with God. He can fool a significant size army by making them not see what is right in front of them. He can fool a massive army, all of Syria's army, by making them hear what is not there at God's own pleasure. He can do that. God can meet the needs of an entire starving city overnight. And you know what? God can protect his own. And God did. God protected Elisha. God protected his own. There were some godly people there. All right. But thirdly, I want to go back to these ladies. Well, let's call them women. Go back to these women that ate the baby. All right. Or ate the child. Doesn't say it was a baby. Now you're going to say to me now, surely, Brother Taylor, you're not going to teach us that we shouldn't eat our children. Okay? Who in their right mind would eat their own children? How many would say, it doesn't matter how hungry I would be, I would never eat my own children? Hands? All over. I'm sure there are. There's none in here but mine, okay? But we might say, it doesn't matter how hungry I would ever get. There is no way I would ever eat my children. I'm going to tell you something. It was not just the fact that they were hungry. They were hungry is only one ingredient in this. 2 ingredients that were made to make this meal. Okay? You know what the other ingredient was? They adapted. Back to our adapting. They adapted. See, what do you mean they adapted? Take your Bibles, turn to Leviticus chapter 26. What's that got to do with 2 Kings? Turn to Leviticus 26. Starting in verse 27, it says, this is God giving a warning to his people. And if ye will not, for all this, hearken unto me, but walk contrary to me, God talking, then I will walk contrary unto you also in fury, and I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. What were their sins? Turning against God, worshiping idols, doing anything but worshiping God. Look at verse 29. Verse 28, I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. Verse 29, and ye shall eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters shall ye eat. Eat your children? Why would God tell that to Moses? Even sin. Would sin make a mother eat her child? You know what? In this passage, this meal, the main ingredient was not the child. The main ingredient was allowing sin to harden their heart towards God, just like he told Moses. He said, if you allow this sin and you won't turn back to me, you know what? It will change you. It will change you to the point where you'll even eat your own children. You know what happened? They ate their own children. I'm not saying you're going to eat your children. I'm not warning you against eating your kids. I'm warning you about sin and what sin will do. And as God says, it could take you to this depths. You know, and there may be depths that are deeper than this, that we would think are deeper than this. But you know what? It's sin against God. In Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 13, it says, but exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Sin, it fools you, okay? It can change you, all right? Am I saying that you'll eat your children? Absolutely not. But I am saying that if we allow sin to harden our heart, we will do what we consider to be unthinkable. We adapt. We adapt and we adapt to sin, and the sin will be our guide, okay? The sin will be our guide. In Romans chapter 6, in verse 12, it says that I could preach for a while just on this verse, all right? Take your Bibles and go there. Romans chapter 6 and verse 12. There's three key words in here. And I'd encourage you to underline these three key words. I'm going to show you. It says, let not your sin therefore reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it in the lusts thereof. The first thing here is letting it. Let not sin. We allow the sin. If we allow that sin in, it will, second word, reign. By me letting it in, it rules. And because it rules, third word, we should obey it. Because I let it in, it now controls me, all right? We can't adapt to the sin that's around us. We can't let it have us. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, the last part of the verse, it says, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Let us lay aside those things that hold us back, those sins that hold us back, that cause us, as in Romans 6:12 says, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it in the lusts thereof. Because if we let that sin in, it will reign, and we will adapt to it and not even realize these vile things that we think are vile now, they won't look so vile when we have been deceived by the sin, okay? We naturally think there is no way that I could ever do anything that vile and that horrific, okay? I dare say that if a month before, or 2 months before, you'd have gone up to these two women and said, you're a terrible person, you're gonna boil your own kids and eat them, you'd have got slapped across the side of the face. There's no way I would do something like that. This is my child, I love my child. They had no idea, but you know what? They had adapted. They had adapted, and the opportunity was there because of the hunger, but they had adapted just as God had predicted back in Leviticus to Moses, hundreds of years before. You turn your back on me, it's going to change you to the point where you'll even eat your own kids. I couldn't eat my own kids. I couldn't do anything that vile. You know, one more verse for you, okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12. It says, wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. You know what? If we let sin in, if we give it that space, it will reign, we will obey it, and we will be deceived by it, like it says there in Hebrews 3:13. It is deceitful. Sin is deceitful. All right, it'll fool you. You won't see what you can clearly see now as being vile. If we let the sin in there, we won't see it as vile anymore. Like those ladies could not see how vile it was to eat their own children. you know what? We got to hate sin. It just slips in a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and we adapt to it. We just think, well, it's you know, if I allow this thing, if I allow this into my entertainment world and I watch this, I can handle this. If you think you can handle it, you've already stepped off. You know what David says? I will set no wicked thing before mine eye. And that's going and doing it on purpose. It's different if something comes in front of you and you have no choice over it, but and there's some lust or there's some covetousness or whatever happens there, and if it pops up and you can refute that, but it's another to set it there. That's why David says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eye. That is letting in the sin, letting it reign, and then it will destroy us, and we will obey it and do the vile thing that we think we would never do. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. You know what? We need to take heed. We need to look. We need to say, search me, O God, and know my heart today. We need to spend some time, you know. Get alone with God. Get alone with God. See, God, is there anything that I have allowed in that I don't even see anymore because I've adapted to that? And I just, it's now my new normal. My new normal is standing in line in Home Depot. My new normal is allowing this sin in my life. Is there anything that I've let in that you know I shouldn't have there, but I can't see it anymore because I've let it deceive me? And let God search your heart and be honest. And when something comes to mind and you say, well, that's not that big of a deal. Yeah, it is, or you wouldn't have just brought it to your mind, okay? The sin is evil. We need to hate it like God hates it, or it'll fool us to the point where, like these ladies did something that was completely vile and out of their character. They thought they would never do that. I'm a mother. I would never eat my child. But they did. You know why? Sin fooled them. They adapted. They adapted. It's good to be adaptable, but we can go be adaptable too far, too, when we adapt to sin. Ask God to search your heart and see what he's got in there for us to get rid of, and lay aside that weight that so doth easily beset us. Have a great day.